Hi everyone, it's Will from the Anastasia Island branch, and I'm here with postdoctoral researcher Alexandra, and she works for the Whitney Lab. So I just wanted to bring her in, and we all probably heard of the Whitney Lab. We know kind of where they're located, but we probably don't really always understand what they do for us in the state and, science at large. So if you can just give us a real quick rundown of what Whitney Lab does.
Yes, well, that's a bit of a loaded question because Whitney Lab actually does quite a bit of different things. It's actually part of the University of Florida. That's mostly associated in Gainesville, but it's kind of its own little branch and its own little entity. But mainly at the Whitney Lab, we do a lot of marine bioscience research. So there's a lot of University of Florida professors that work there with their graduate students and other students, and we do a lot of in-house research. So mainly we use marine animals to study different aspects of cellular biology that we can apply to humans, is mainly what a lot of people do. But that's not all that Whitney Lab is. So there's also a really great research turtle program that I'm sure a lot of people in the community know about, where if there's any injured sea turtles, they'll often bring them there, rehabilitate them, and send them back out. But they also do a lot of research on the turtles there as well, especially on some of a specific virus that causes a tumor in a lot of the turtles. But we're also really big into community programs. So there's a lot of students and marine science camps that go through Whitney that are unfortunately on hold this summer. But we'll pick back up hopefully as soon as they can. And so they're really involved in trying to get a lot of students to be able to come in and learn more about the marine environment to bring back to where they're at. And we also have a lot of visiting research scientists that come to stay and give talks at our lab, as well as we have a lot of awesome volunteers or docents that work at Whitney that spend a lot of their time teaching these marine science courses with students or developing programs at the lab. So it's there's a lot going on. Sorry if that's too long of an answer.
No, it's okay. If it does a lot, it does a lot. That's
yeah.
better in some ways. So, so what is actually, with all of that Whitney Lab does, what is your role within the lab?
So my role as a postdoctoral researcher is that I work under a specific principal investigator, Dr. Christy Schnitzler, who's actually a newer professor at the University of Florida. And specifically, we work on a marine hydroid organism called Hydractinia. And it's a really cool organism that grows as a colony, so it's a bunch of individuals that actually grow together and share one stomach. And we study this animal because they're great at regenerating or regrowing parts of their bodies. And one of the coolest things is that they have a type of stem cell. We all have stem cells that can grow into different tissues in our bodies, but this animal has a specific type of stem cell that can grow into any type of tissue in the animal's body. So if you cut off its head, it can use this stem cell and differentiate to completely regrow its head within 3 days. So it's really, really cool. So my role in the lab for this research organism is I'm trying to understand how the immune system is involved in this regeneration and this type of stem cell. And specifically, I'm studying genes called chitinases, and these are found in all animals, including humans. And we think that they're actually really important in getting this regeneration going. And if we can better understand how this component of the innate immune system is involved in regeneration, then perhaps we can better understand how to apply that to stem cells in human research. So trying to help our organs or our skin heal faster, things like that. So it's a big leap that we're not, I study more at a basic science level, but that's the idea of studying what we study.
Yeah, that's involved.
Yeah, so, sorry.
No, don't apologize for that. So this organism, is it, what's the word am I looking for? Because some organisms you can only see at through a microscope. Is this something that you can see
microscopic?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
microscopic.
no. Yeah, no, great question.
Yeah.
No, you can you can see this organism with your eye. It is small,
Hmm.
but what's really cool about it actually is that it grows on the back of hermit crabs, on the back of their shells. So as you might know, hermit crabs don't grow their own shells. They're actually shells from snails that have died, and they go move inside those shells, and as they grow, they find other shells. Well, specific types of shells attract hydroctinia to grow on them. And the reason why a lot of hermit crabs really like these type of shells is because hydroctinia is part of an animal group called cnidarians, and all cnidarians have stinging cells. So if you touch them, you'll feel a little sting, like a lot of jellyfish. Jellyfish are another type of cnidarian that if you touch, you might feel a sting. So hermit crabs use this hydroctinia on their shells to protect them. And so anyways, yeah, so hermit crabs, maybe about this size. There can be smaller ones, but there can be larger ones as well. And the hydroctinia grow on top of those shells. So you can actually see them with your eyes.
So is that found locally? I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a hermit crab that has anything on it. Not that I spend a lot of
Yeah,
time looking, so that's
yeah.
like,
Well, there has been claims that some have been found out in the Matanzas River. However, we've never seen them, but we do know that there are some species of hydroctinia on these hermit crab shells over in Cedar Key on
hmm.
the Gulf Coast of Florida. So we don't work with those ones specifically. The main species that we work with is actually from up on northeast coast near Massachusetts. So they're kind of all over. And then hydroctinia also grow all over in Europe. There's a species that's been most studied in the Mediterranean Sea until we started finding this other species in the United States. So that's what we focus on now. But they're kind of all over, but we really try to work with two main species because we have a lot of genetic tools that we've already developed with them. So we know their genomes. So if
Yeah.
you know their genomes, you can ask a lot more specific questions and do a lot more research to actually understand what's going on rather than working with whatever species you find. But apparently there are some over here, but we've never seen them.
Okay. And I was like,
That's a
I
great
don't,
question.
yeah.
I would
Um,
love to find, if anybody finds hydroctinia or some hermit crab shells with little jellies growing on them, please bring them to the Whitney Lab.
um, so is it like you said you worked underneath this professor? Is it just
Yes.
you? Do you have like, is there like a small team? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. In most research labs, it's almost always a great team effort. At least to me, the best science comes from the teams, right? So I am one of two postdoctoral researchers in our current lab. And then underneath us, there's one graduate student, and then we also have a lab tech that works with the animals, making sure they're healthy and staying well, especially during this time with coronavirus. So we have a very small team, and as I mentioned earlier, our professor is quite new. She's been at the University of Florida about 4 years now, so it takes some time to build up your team, but she's hoping to have more graduate students working in our lab as well. But at the Whitney Lab, there are other professors that have larger or smaller teams. Mark Martindale, who's actually the director of the Whitney Lab, has about 10 people working under him. So and they all work together on various projects, but still are able to do things together. So we have our individual pockets of teams, but we all try to work together when we can.
Hmm. What is your favorite thing about working for a Whitney Lab?
Oh, I there's several. One, location obviously is pretty great. I mean, if you're having a rough day, something's not working in the lab, you can just walk outside and maybe see some dolphins or just take a deep breath. And it's a really beautiful place to work. The other aspect that I love is I love the people there. It's really great that it's a small community because you really get to know everyone. And then along with that, a lot of the community, as I mentioned, that work with the local community and do a lot of educational programs, it gives me a lot of opportunities to also work with those educational programs. And that's one of my favorite things to do. So there's a lot of cool opportunities there with the people. and it's just a beautiful location. So.
Um, is the lab is the only education the lab does outreach? Is there anything in-house, like let's say someone was interested and they wanted to come by on a regular, circumstance, not with any sort of virus? Is there a way for them to witness anything the Whitney Lab is doing within the building?
Yeah. It's a little harder to do just because everyone's timing with
Mhm.
research is all over the place. Because when you work with live animals, timing can be very difficult. But there are constant programming and lab tours with the sea turtle hospital,
Mhm.
and so they're pretty great actually at they mainly focus on the sea turtles, which is awesome. But they also kind of take you all around the lab, and so that's one great opportunity if people wanted to come check things out. You can also, maybe contact specific individuals if they have time to give you tours or take you around. But it's a little hard to get through the actual labs, as I mentioned, just because people are working. But the Sea Turtle Hospital tours, I highly recommend. People really seem to enjoy them, and they do a really great job. And then lastly, sometimes we have some talks that are open to the public in an auditorium that we have at the Whitney Lab. And I highly recommend people to come to those. And afterwards, you can kind of walk around and see some cool aspects of the lab.
So is there any one thing or maybe a few things that you feel like the general public may not know about the lab that you really want them to be aware of?
Um,
I know that's probably kind of a hard question to think about, but
that's a great question. I only started in August, so perhaps I'm not the best person to ask, but I think something that's really cool about the lab is that it's constantly growing and bettering itself in the sense that we really do a lot of great, hardcore, basic research that I think the general public probably doesn't really know about. Like I talked to you a little bit about my specific project, but there are a lot of different projects going on that are very very cool. So I recommend if people want to know a little bit more about those specific projects going on at the lab to come to some of those seminars that are open to the public. But uh, I think maybe something else that maybe not everybody knows is that there are volunteer opportunities
Mhm.
if you, especially if you want to work with some of the educational programs. Um, so you can contact the educational department of the Whitney Lab. You can find it on their website if you want to volunteer in something like that. Or if you are a younger student and you're trying to maybe look to find a way into research or into marine science in general, we also do accept lab volunteers, obviously when the time is more normal. So those are if some things that people might not know. So if you just reach out to some of the main people at the Whitney Lab, it's possible that you can set up some of those opportunities. But I think it's really important to know that we do a lot of cool research, and I would love it if people wanted to learn more about everything that goes on there.
And last question,
Yeah.
I like to ask this, especially since you just finished with grad school.
Yeah.
What drew you to Whitney Lab? Like grad school is a crazy time, right? So you have
Yeah.
all these things, you're like, I don't know where to go. Um, did you start this with Whitney Lab in mind, or did you like discover it in your grad school path?
Great question. I actually discovered it in my grad school, and I think my position there, I feel really lucky to have because I actually worked down at Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. It was still at the University of Florida, but that is actually where I started my graduate student research. And we actually had to come up to Whitney Lab to get seawater. We worked on squid down where we're at. And I know seawater's all over, but Whitney Lab has a very specific filtration system for seawater, and you really don't want a lot of crummy stuff in your seawater when you're working with animals in a lab. So we used to drive all the way up to Whitney Lab, get seawater, and bring it back down to work with our squid. And it was, being a part of that, just coming up here, I got to kind of see what the Whitney Lab was like. But I actually got this position because I went to a conference. Oftentimes in science, actually, probably anything in life, it's oftentimes who you know, right? Or who you meet. And that's how opportunities can arise. And I actually attended a conference that was all about cnidarians, these stinging jellies in the marine environment. Um, that even though I didn't work on them, I worked on squid, they allowed me to present and I met a bunch of cool people. And that's actually where I met my current advisor, Dr. Christy Schnitzler. And she ended up having an opening in her lab when I graduated, and it just all kind of worked out really great. So it's a pretty cool opportunity that I got to be here. But it's a short term. I'm, you know, postdoctoral positions are relatively just a few years. So I won't be here forever, but it's been a really awesome opportunity and a great place to work.
I just want to thank you for doing this. It's
Thank
great.
you.
So hopefully while you're here for the next few years, we can maybe do more of these
Yeah,
as we progress. That would be great.
yeah.
And I just want to thank you. I'm sure our patrons will love this. So thanks again.